Edgar Allan Poe is dead. He died in Baltimore the day before yesterday. This announcement will startle many, but few will be grieved by it. The poet was well known personally or by reputation in all of America. He had readers in England and in several of the states of continental Europe, but he had no friends. As you see, I am not dead. My books are still being read, and it seems that a premature burial of my own self was the reason why I never attained greatness or solvency. Such was the nature of my degradation that I died drunk, delirious, and poverty-stricken. I was found lying in the street in a very bad way. I still don't know what happened to this dying day. You see, Death and I had been playing a game for a whole year, and despite my cheating methods using laudanum, a poison of my day, neither of us succeeded, and the game ended in a draw. Death reluctantly took me into her bosom. On October the 7th, 1849, I died. Died in the flesh, but never in the spirit. I am still a wandering spirit amongst you all. My spirit lives on within your being. I'm alive in each and every one of you in some way. You see, my mind reached beyond the barriers of space and delved into the natural, supernatural of the soul and the mind. The physical being lost in the physical world, the mind became loose and wandered through time and space like a lonely, lost, wandering soul, eternally, never to reach its goal. From Charter's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon, in my view. My mother and father were leading actor and actress in Boston, Massachusetts. I was born on January the 19th, 1809. My name was derived from the great bard, as father was playing Edmund, the bastard son of Gloucester, in King Lear. I, being legitimate, was named after the other son, Edgar. Poor Tom. Mother played Cordelia, and I appeared on stage for several weeks, but was never seen, as I was still in my mother's womb. Father had taken to drink. It was his undoing. One night he did not appear at all. He was undone. History has no further record of him, but the sins of the father were visited on the son. And my mother died on December the 8th, 1811. So I was adopted by a Mr. Allan when I was 3. My foster parents were not show business people. They ran a general store under the cognomen of Alice and Allan. Their business was a success, and it led to my beginning a costly education. Despite Mr. Allan's materialistic pursuits, he frequently quoted the bard and had a store of tales from his own native Scotland. He had been born in Ayr, home of Robert Burns, the poet. The war with Great Britain waged until 1815, but as soon as the treaty was signed, Alice and Allan opened a branch in England. I had attained the age of 6 and was about so high. We took the boat to Liverpool, and although Mother was very seasick, Father and I spliced the main brace and walked the planks with the ease of 2 ancient mariners. We stayed a week in Liverpool and then on to Scotland and my father's old haunts. His Scots accent becoming very noticeable when he quoted Robbie Burns' Tam O'Shanter to me. We travelled about visiting many glorious towns: Glasgow, Edinburgh, Newcastle, Sheffield, and finally London. We dwelt at 47 Southampton Row, Russell Square, parish of Bloomsbury. My father employed a clerk, George Dubourg, who had two sisters that ran a school in Sloane Street, Chelsea. When he heard that his new employer had a 7-year-old son seeking a school, he deemed that I should be sent to Chelsea. My stepmother lost her strength in the gloom and fog of London, so father took her to Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, where she wished to remain. Now father had his hands full, with me at school and mother in the country. However, he insisted on my going to a more advanced school, as I had done so well at the Dubourgs. My earliest recollections of a school life are connected with a large, rambling Elizabethan house in a misty-looking village of England, where were a vast number of gigantic and gnarled trees, and where all the houses were excessively ancient. In truth, it was a dreamlike and spirit-soothing place, that venerable old town, Stoke Newington. The boys seemed to dislike me. They mimicked my accent, and once while playing football, a boy trod on my hand. The surgeon's bill came to 13 shillings. Latin and French were among my best subjects, and I was well ahead in history and literature. The headmaster, however, did not like the constant treatment of pocket money from my foster father. Business was poor, and father was down to his last £100 when I brought home a school bill of £70. He decided to return to Richmond. While the London mobs were unhitching the horses of Queen Caroline's coach and pulling it themselves, and George IV was accusing her of high treason, mother, father, and I scuttled through the crowds to catch the coach to Liverpool. The business was saved as the tariff bill did not go through. So, we set off from Liverpool on June 14th, 1820. Father with hopeful spirits, mother still her seasickly self. Then myself, returning to the country where I was to be known as the writer, Edgar Allan Poe. Gaily we dight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell, as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim's shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. Ride boldly, ride, the shade replied. If you seek for El Dorado, over a month at sea before we returned to the squalor of New York. We returned to live at Mr. Ellis's house in Richmond, Virginia. At school, I was a leader in all subjects, even at barefist fighting. My first attempts at writing came at 13 years as I was an avid reader. Joseph Clark, my schoolmaster, found an anthology of my poetry while marking my arithmetic. I won first prize for elocution and all admired my famous 6-mile swim from London's Wharf to Warwick on the James River. 1822, Edgar Allan Poe 13 and about so high. Oh, that my young life were a lasting dream, my spirit not awakening till the beam of an eternity should bring the morrow. Yes, though that long dream were of hopeless sorrow, 'twere better than the cold reality of waking life. To him whose heart must be, and hath been still, upon the lovely earth, a chaos of deep passion from his birth. But should it be, that dream eternally continuing, as dreams have been to me in my young boyhood, should it thus be given, 'twere folly still to hope for higher heaven. For I have revelled when the sun was bright, in the summer sky, in dreams of living light and loveliness, have left my very heart in climes of my imagining, apart from mine own home, with beings that have been of mine own thought. What more could I have seen? 'Twas once, and once only, and the wild hour from my remembrance shall not pass. Some power or spell had bound me. 'Twas a chilly wind came o'er me in the night, and left behind its image on my spirit, or the moon shone on my slumbers in her lofty noon, too coldly, or the stars. Howe'er it was, that dream was as that night wind, let it pass. I have been happy, though in a dream. I have been happy, and I love the theme. Dreams, in their vivid colouring of life, as in that fleeting, shadowy, misty strife of semblance with reality, which brings to the delirious eye more lovely things of paradise and love, and all our own, than young hope in his sunniest hour hath known. My introverted loneliness caused me to leave the leadership of the boys at school and wander home alone. Then I made the acquaintance of Robert Stannard and met his mother, Helen Stannard, whose grace and sympathetic nature captured my heart. She lived in a stately home with every luxury offsetting her own beauty. She became my Helen. Helen, thy beauty is to me like those Nysian barks of yore, that gently o'er a perfumed sea the weary, wayworn wanderer bore to his own native shore. On desperate seas, long wont to roam, thy hyacinth hair, thy classic face, thy Naiad airs have brought me home to the glory that was Greece and the grandeur that was Rome. Lo, in yon brilliant window niche, how statue-like I see thee stand, the agate lamp within thy hand. Ah, Psyche from the regions which are Holy Land. Her illness began, consumption and madness, a fate of the period surrounding many of my lady friends and myself. I was 15 when the news came that she was dead. Oh, I care not that my earthly lot hath little of earth in it, that years of love have been forgot in the fever of a minute. I heed not that the desolate are happier sweet than I, but that you meddle with my fate, who am a passer-by. 'Tis not that my founts of bliss are gushing strange with tears, or that the thrill of a single kiss hath paused many years. 'Tis not that the flowers of 20 springs, which have withered as they rose, lie dead on my heartstrings with the weight of an age of snows. Not that the grass, oh may it thrive, on my grave is growing or grown, but that while I am dead, yet alive, I cannot be, lady, alone. Lieutenant Poe was my new title when I joined the Judy Morgan Riflemen. While reveling in this newfound glory, the gaze of all females, yet still pursuing my melancholy at Helen's grave, Father's business grew worse. He began to go out of business, and during the next few years he wound up his affairs. My foster father took a disgruntled view of my poetry and my gadding about. He did not understand that I was not ungrateful, merely taking advantage of the effects God had given me while still young and able to enjoy them. My uncle William Galt died in 1824, leaving enough money for a completely new house. I was given a private tutor and sent to the University of Virginia. It was during my 16th year that I fell in love with Sarah Elmira Royster. We were both in love with love. I drew her portrait, but rather than flatter her with my own poems, I quoted her the wit of Byron. Thus, at 17, I had everything. Myself, a smart young Virginian gentleman with an excellent schooling background, a pleasant home, fine clothes to wear, slaves to dress me, and engaged to a beautiful girl who was an ideal to truth and beauty. All set to start my last stage of the literary education at the university. I had reached the pinnacle of my comfortable youth. happiest day, the happiest hour, my seared and blighted heart hath known. The highest hope of pride and power, I feel, hath flown. Of power, said I? Yes, such I ween, but they have vanished long, alas. The visions of my youth have been, but let them pass. And pride, what have I now with thee? Another brow may even inherit the venom thou hast poured in me. Be still, my spirit. The happiest day, the happiest hour, mine eyes shall see, have ever seen. The brightest glance of pride and power, I feel, have been. But were that hope of pride and power now offered with the pain, even then I felt that brightest hour I would not live again. When hope, that eagle that towered, could see no cliff beyond him in the sky, his pinions were bent droopingly, and homeward turned his softened eye. 'Twas sunset, when the sun will part, there comes a sullenness of heart to him who still would look upon the glory of the summer sun. That soul will hate the evening mist, so often lovely, and will list to the sound of the coming darkness, known to those whose spirits hearken, as one who in a dream of night would fly, but cannot from a danger nigh. What though the moon, the white moon, shed all the splendour of her noon? Her smile is chilly, and her beam in that time of dreariness will seem so like you gathering your breath, a portrait taken after death. And boyhood is a summer sun, whose waning is the dreariest one. For all we live to know is known, and all we seek to keep hath flown. Let life then, as a dayflower, fall with the noonday beauty, which is all. I do believe that Iblis hath a snare in every human path. As how, when in the holy grove I wandered of the idol love, who daily scents his snowy wings with incense of burnt offerings for the most unpolluted things, whose pleasant boughs are yet so riven above with trellised rays from heaven, no mote may shun, no tiniest fly, the lightning of his eagle eye. How was it that ambition crept unseen amid the revels there, till growing bold, he laughed and leapt in the tangles of love's very hair? The university and my studies cost many dollars, which John Allen refused to pay. Then I damned myself in a letter to a debtor by saying that my foster father was seldom sober. The rift caused was never again breached. My poverty-stricken weeks in Boston found me selling my only volume of poetry. A few copies were sold, but my name was in print. Edgar A. Perry was the pseudonym I used to enlist in the army, stating my age as 22, though only 18 years had besieged my brow. The siege of my senses was about to begin. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time, long ago, and every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day along the ramparts, plumed and pallid, a winged odour went away. Wanderers in that happy valley, through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne were sitting Porphyrogeny, in state, his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home, the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. May 1829, Baltimore. I see the remains of my family, a paralytic grandmother, Her daughter, Maria Clem, widowed with 2 children, Virginia and Henry. Henry Poe had used my poems and his own initials and written on my love for Sarah Elmira Royster. All avenues were tried for publication of my poems, and Mr. Allan forwarded money intended for my entry into West Point Military Academy. I lived economically and walked fruitlessly to Washington, only to return due to my lack of finance and my non-acceptance to West Point. December 1829. My first volume of poetry was published. The reviews were lukewarm, but I was showing my genius in Tamerlane and Al-Iraq. Mr. Allan invited me over to Richmond, where I was immediately reclothed, rehoused, and rehosed. The money was found for West Point, and I left my Virginia home for the last time. At West Point, I was the eldest, and felt an odd man out with all the youngsters, and I could not stand the drilling. Our rules were rigid. No tobacco, alcohol, or card playing. Even games, plays, and novels were taboo. My education prompted me to walk through Maths and French, but the money began to run out. Mr. Allan would not help, and my court-martial for certain offences was due. I was turned out at West Point, penniless, with a cold and an infected ear. My one belief was predominant. Poetry is the art, my art, God's art. Poetry is for pleasure. Poetry is a pleasurable idea put to music. Science, I do not believe in thee. My code is my work, my prodigious effort, and my ethics are within my art. In heaven a spirit doth dwell, whose heartstrings are a lute. None sings so wildly well as the angel Israfel, and the giddy stars, so legends tell, ceasing their hymns, attend the spell of his voice, all mute. And they say, the starry choir and the other listening things, that Israfel fire is owing to that lyre by which he sits and sings, the trembling living wire of those unusual strings. If I could dwell where Israfel hath dwelt, and he where I, he might not sing so wildly well a mortal melody, while a bolder note than this might swell from my lyre within the sky. The new edition of poems received favourable criticism from the same critics who rejected me before. $100 prize money for the best short story was announced in the Sunday Courier in Baltimore. At this point in my life, old debtors returned. John Allan was remarrying Louisa Gabriella Patterson. I was threatened with the possibility of imprisonment and wrote to my foster father using dignity and humility. After I'd spent a miserable Christmas, help arrived early in the new year. My stories did not win the competition, but were published during that year. This saved me from the debtor's prison. I dedicated myself to the pen-in-hand writer and bachelor of romantic pursuits. Railroads were being built. Time was moving forward. John Allan was ailing, and no more subsistence was forthcoming. My position had reached another desperate stage when he died in 1834, leaving me nothing in his will. The spring, however, was the beginning of the change, when another competition was announced. I should have won all 3 prizes, but the editor of the Visitor, writing under an assumed name, won the poetry prize. My poem, The Colosseum, was published later, and the story that gave me my first $100 prize was MS, found in a bottle. In many productions, terror has been the thesis. I maintain that terror is not of Germany, but of the soul. The horror that went into my stories was the horror that I felt at the time. In Berenice, I refer to my cousin Virginia, likewise in Eleonora, and despite my incessant love for cats, this feline creature was the subject of one of my most horrific tales, the Black Cats. One morning, in cool blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming down my eyes and the British remorse of my heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me, and I knew it had given me no reason of offence. Hung it because I knew that in so doing, I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and terrible God. The change was coming, but no material gain. It took all my tales to the Folio Club to raise $15 so we could enjoy a Merry Christmas in 1834. The Southern Literary Messenger printed Hans Fell, Berenice, and Lionizing, but my unkempt appearance failed me for a teaching job. Once again, an imploring letter, this time to John Kennedy, publisher. I was invited to his house, fed, clothed, and given a horse. I could have eaten one. He urged me to write whatever would make money, and Paulician was therefore shelved. 1835. Grandma Poe died, and her pension with her. I, being the only beneficiary, became editor of the Southern Literary Messenger at the age of 26. I was now accepted to a social system where only success counted. Failure was unheard of and described. This led to drunken debauches, and occasionally I would find myself in bed, not knowing how I'd reached my repose. I was affluent and in circulation, receiving the begging letters instead of sending them. But even a nip in the morning was required to restore my senses. After a trial month, I rushed to Baltimore to collect my cousin at Auntie Maria. We resided in a boarding house, and my prolific output paid more than my basic salary, but I was sworn to remain sober. As the circulation increased, my own contributions slackened off, and I turned to my cousin Virginia. Our marriage was imminent, though Virginia was only 13, and I was 27. I reviewed Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, which inspired The Adventures of Arthur Gordon Pym, and left the Messenger in 1837. A city of narrow streets, mud tracks, fit only for horse and cart. This was New York, where I went to write for the Review. I charmed the bookseller, William Gowns, to become our lodger. He was naturally affected by Virginia's beauty and Mrs. Clem's housekeeping. The country was going through an economic crisis, and the Review was suspended. We moved to 113.5 Carmine Street, and it was the lodgers who paid enough to keep me at my manuscripts. Arthur Gordon Pym was penned, but I had failed to conquer New York. It afforded a move to Philadelphia, a city struggling for supremacy over New York. 1838, Philadelphia, and the search for the soul. My intellectual standards were far above the Gentleman's Magazine run by William E. Burton, the actor. Having built up the circulation, I declined after Burton's failure to give me a rise. I volunteered to campaign for the Whig Party. My prospectus for the Penn magazine was complete. This was to be my very own magazine, with worldwide appeal. The work proved too much, and the drink to hand consumed. Illness struck me down. Penn magazine postponed until March 1st, 1841. The Whigs won, Pennsylvania. How I laboured, how I toiled, how I wrote, ye gods did I not write. And I knew not the word ease. By day I adhered to my desk, and at night, a pale student, I consumed the midnight oil. You should have seen me, you should. I leaned to the right, I leaned to the left. I sat forward, I sat backward, I sat at one end. I sat tete base, bowing my head closer to the alabaster page. And through good report, and through ill report I wrote. What I wrote is unnecessary to say. The style, that was the thing. 1841 to 1842, the very best year. Work, food, comfort, and no debts. Graham's Magazine and the Saturday Evening Post shared offices, and I contributed to both. The happiest day, the happiest hour mine eyes shall see, have ever seen, the brightest glance of pride and power, I feel have been. I was 33, and there were now to come 5 years of hopelessness and despair, which would scar me inwardly for my last 7 years. You say Can you hint to me what was the terrible evil which caused the irregularities so profoundly lamented? Yes, I can do more than hint. This evil was the greatest that can befall a man. 6 years ago, a wife whom I loved as no man ever loved before ruptured a blood vessel in singing. Her life was despaired of. I took leave of her forever and underwent all the agonies of her death. She recovered partially, and I again hoped. At the end of the year, the vessel broke again. I went through precisely the same scene. Again about a year afterward. Then again, and even once again at varying intervals. Each time I felt all the agonies of her death. And at each accession of the disorder, I loved her more dearly and clung to her life with more desperate pertinacity. But I am constitutionally sensitive, nervous in a very unusual degree. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. During these fits of absolute unconsciousness, I drank, God only knows how often or how much. As a matter of course, my enemies referred the insanity to the drink, rather than the drink to the insanity. "1843. The Stylus" was the new title for my old magazine. Thomas C. Clarke inserted my biography in the Satie Museum, to my disapproval. An attempt at a political career was spent soliciting subscriptions for the Stylus while on a merry binge with friend Rowdy Dow. This was not a great success. The writing took another turn when the Goldberg won me a prize of $50 after I retrieved it from Graham, who had paid his usual fee. It was adapted as a play by Silas S. Steele and presented at the Walnut Street Theatre on August the 8th, 1843. Potential subscribers and contributors were gathered for the Stylus when I quarrelled with Clarke and all backing was withdrawn. 1844. My lectures were my latest calling, and lack of opportunity in Philadelphia, a 40-day return to New York. Prepared for my trip to New York was the balloon hoax, and after a good breakfast at the boarding house in Greenwich Street, I left with $4.50 in my pocket. The story was introduced as headline news and sold at $0.50 and even $1 a copy. I contributed articles and reviews. Then in the summer we moved to a farmhouse, where I spent many days dreaming, rambling, and scribbling. It was here that I carefully and meticulously constructed The Raven, a resounding success. The bird beat the bug, all hollow. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Presently my heart grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. For the fact is I was napping, and so faintly you came tapping, and so gently you came rapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in this stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not an instant stop nor stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. The Raven gave me a contract with John Biscoe as co-editor with Charles F. Briggs on the Broadway Journal, the nearest thing to having a magazine of my own. The Goldberg was translated into French, Murders in the Rue Morgue a year later. My literary disparagement of Longfellow's works and his claim of plagiarism against me blew up into a verbal battle which left a final slur on myself. This did not deter my lectures nor my contributions to Godey's, Graham's, the American Review, and the Journal. Henry C. Watson became my partner when the Biscoe and Briggs backing departed, making my share of the Journal 50%, even nearer my dream. Here was my true calling, the man of letters, words, books, and love for life. People were pleased with my manner, and my bearing was one of high class. However, in 1845, funds were running low, circulation was not high enough to meet rising costs. And early in 1846, I wrote my valedictory to the Journal, bidding farewell as cordially to friends as to foes. The war of literati was on. New York was the battlefield. Clark and Thomas Dunn English led the foray against me. I riposted by writing and criticizing with my own ferocity, winning the battle and $225 in cost. This boost to 1847 was not the beginning of a good year. My own illness was stemming my flow of work, and Virginia was on her last lap of the struggle with life and death. At the end of January, Virginia waned and finally died. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged selves of heaven went coveting her and me. Yes, that was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, that a wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, that a wind came out from a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who are older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Deep in earth my love is lying, and I must weep alone. Now I began work on the greatest effort of my life, Eureka. My debts continued despite my flow of work to Graham's magazine. 1848, and my comeback was prevalent. I attempted to resurrect the stylus, and from a suggestion, created the bells, my most rhythmical poem. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells, what a world of merriment their melody foretells. How they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle in the icy air of night, while the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with a crystalline delight, keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 from the jingling and the tinkling of the bells. Sarah Helen Whitman, my new love, inspired more poems. I was launched again on my literary career, and women charmed to me, especially widows. My lecture at Wentworth Hall on the poets and poetry of America was a great success. Another flame crossed my path, Mrs. Nancy Richmond, who became my Annie. On a spree, I challenged John and Daniel to a duel, and later, when sober, contributed to his paper, The Examiner. My affair with Sarah Helen Whitman was fleeting and fatuous, more a flight of fancy than a lasting root. My love for Mrs. Richmond was stronger, but she could not and would not leave her husband and daughter for me. On one occasion, my love drove me to take laudanum, which did not have the desired effect. Instead of killing me, it made me vomit, and I was ill afterwards. Mrs. Whitman was warned against meeting me, but her mother persuaded her to marry me. By now, I turned my affections towards Annie. I tried the stylist, yet again, as an alternative to marriage. Hear the mellow wedding bells, golden bells. What a tale of happiness their harmony foretells. Through the balmy air of night, how they ring out their delight, from the molten golden notes and all in tune. What a liquid ditty floats to the turtle dove, who listens while she gloats on the moon. The marriage was arranged for a Monday, and we were to return to Mrs. Clem at Fordham on the Tuesday. Someone tipped Hallam with a note about my early morning nips, and the engagement was nipped in the bud. She broke it up immediately and was a constant embarrassment to me until my death. Hear the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulence it tells. In the startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek out of tune. Away from Providence and the emotional dizziness of female suitors, I started my final year with a burst of creativity. Circulating all the newspapers, I made the name of Poe famous. Inspiration followed in a late arriving letter from Edward H. Patterson, who wished to publish his own magazine with myself as editor. The stylist at last. The money was not forthcoming, and I continued my vain pursuit of Annie. A heat wave struck New York, and illness hit my pen. Eureka completed. My only wish was to die. It is pain to live, but bliss to die. I was a lonely rat in a city of evil. Men sought my life, and pain and doubt rendered my brain barren. Saved by my friends Barr and Lippard, who put money in my pocket and sent me to Baltimore, I found torment my only friend in Philadelphia. Illness from food poisoning and deterioration of health showed me I was taking the final path. Stay for me there. I shall not fail to meet thee in that hollow vale. There was only a fading chance of the stylist becoming a $3 instead of a $5 paper. The middle of October was settled for a meeting. I continued with the lectures when health prevailed and turned down invitations due to my lack of a dress coat. Richmond was to be my final home, fatally in the state of Virginia. Sarah Elmira Shelton, my first love, returned to be my last love. I hoped for another marriage. Rufus W. Griswold, my old publisher, gathered up my entire works for publication, and I joined the Richmond High Society. I set out on my final trip to New York with a premonition that I would never see Elmira again. My final party at Sadler's Restaurant was a gay affair. I left donned in a palm leaf hat and clutching a Malacca cane. My movements from then on were oblivious even to myself. I was taken into hospital on October the 3rd, and after many ravings, died in a delirium on October the 7th. No, sir, they who saw me what I was shall never see me as I am. I had been found unconscious, in ragged attire, lying in the street, clutching a Malacca cane. So far, I had not opened my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back, unbound. I reached out my hand and it fell heavily on something damp and hard. There I suffered it to remain for many minutes, while I imagined where and what I could be. I longed, yet dared not to employ my vision. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew aghast, lest there should be nothing to see. At length, with a wild desperation at heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts then were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close. I still lay quietly. I made effort to exercise my reason. I brought to mind the inquisitorial proceedings and attempted from that point to deduce my real condition. The sentence had passed, and it appeared to me that a very long interval had since elapsed. Yet not for a moment did I suppose myself actually dead. Such a supposition, notwithstanding what we read in fiction, is altogether inconsistent with real existence. But where and in what state was I? My outstretched hands at length encountered some solid obstruction. It was a wall seemingly of stone masonry, very smooth, slimy, and cold. I followed it up, stepping with all the careful distrust with which certain antique narratives had inspired me. The ground was moist and slippery. I staggered onward for some time when I stumbled and fell. My excessive fatigue induced me to remain prostrate, and sleep soon overtook me as I lay. When I arose from the attempt, the mystery of the alteration in the chamber broke at once upon my understanding. I had observed that although the outlines of the figures upon the walls were sufficiently distinct, yet the colours seemed blurred and indefinite. These colours had now assumed and were momentarily assuming a startling and most intense brilliancy that gave to the spectral portraitures an aspect which might have thrilled even firmer nerves than my own. Demon eyes of a wild and ghastly vivacity gazed upon me in 1,000 directions, where none had been visible before, and gleamed with the lurid lustre of a fire that I could not force my imagination to regard as unreal. Unreal. Even while I breathed, there came to my nostrils the breath of the vapour of heated iron. A suffocating odour pervaded the prison. A deeper glow settled each moment in the eyes that glared at my agonies. A richer tint of crimson diffused itself over the pictured horrors of blood. I gasped for breath. I panted. There could be no doubt of the design of my tormentors. Almost unrelenting, almost demoniac of men. I shrank from the glowing metal to the centre of the cell. The heat rapidly increased. And once again, I looked up, shuddering as with a fit of the ague. There had been a second change in the cell, and now the change was obviously in the form. As before, it was in vain that I first attempted to appreciate or understand what was taking place, but not long was I left in doubt. The inquisitorial vengeance had been hurried by my twofold escape from the pit to the pendulum, but there was to be no more dallying with the king of terrors. The room had been square. I saw that two of its iron angles were now acute, two consequently obtuse. The fearful difference quickly increased, with a low, rumbling sound. In an instant, the apartment had shifted its shape into that of a lozenge. But the alteration stopped not there. I neither hoped nor desired it to stop. I could clasp the red walls to my bosom as a garment of eternal peace. Death, I said, any death but that of the pit. For might I not have known that into the pit it was the object of the burning iron to urge me? Could I resist its glow? Or even if that, could I withstand its pressure? And now, flatter and flatter grew the lozenge with a rapidity that left me no time for contemplation. Its centre, and of course its greatest width, came just over the yawning gulf. I shrank back, but the closing walls pressed me resistlessly onward. At length, for my seared and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. I struggled no more, but the agony of my soul found vent in one loud, long, and final scream of despair. God, help my poor soul!